I just realized this whole time that my microphone wasn't on. Sorry about the poor audio. Hey everybody, what's going on? Eric here with Switch Adapted Toys, and today I'm going to be showing you how to adapt this gel blaster. If you like this video, if you find it helpful, make sure you hit the like button and hit subscribe because we're posting new videos all the time. And it really does help us out in a huge way, so thank you in advance for that. Alright, so there's a couple things we should probably talk about before we adapt this toy. First thing is, this toy is really intended for older kids. It shoots these little gel pellets pretty fast, and it even comes with safety goggles. So it's not a toy that you probably want to adapt for everybody, but there are definitely some older kids out there that I think would really enjoy this toy. So use your discretion. Obviously don't give this toy to a young child. Be careful with it. Always use the safety goggles when you're using it. Never point it at people's face, yada yada yada. Be smart, be safe. But this toy, I think we can still adapt, and I think it'll be a lot of fun for some people out there. So first thing we're going to do is turn the toy on its side and remove all the screws on the outside of the toy. So I've got all the screws removed, but I need to remove this top portion of the toy. So I'm just going to pull it kind of back along the rail and it'll pop right off. The next thing we need to do is remove these little rails here. They just slide right out. And now we should be able to separate the two halves of the toy. Just like that. And I'm going to set this half aside because I don't think we're going to need anything on that side. And this trigger just kind of fell out, so I'm going to just set it aside as well. Now you can see here, this is where the trigger presses against this little switch. So what we're going to do is we're going to solder our headphone jack wires to these 2 points on this switch where these red wires are going to. That way we can bypass the trigger by using the external switch, but we also still maintain the functionality of the trigger. So the blaster can either be operated with the trigger or with the external switch. Alright, so the next thing that we need to do is drill our hole for our headphone jack wire. And I see a couple issues here. First issue is there's just not a lot of space inside this toy. This main part of the blaster kind of fills the whole cavity. So I don't, I would love to be able to run the wire out the back or someplace that's really convenient. But unfortunately my wire is not very long and there's just not a lot of room in here for me to be fishing wires through. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to drill my hole right behind where this switch is. So that will allow me to gain access to it. So next thing we need to do is prep our headphone jack. So I've actually cut mine kind of short because there's not going to be a lot of room inside that toy to stuff a bunch of wires. First thing we need to do is remove the exterior casing on the headphone jack. And inside your headphone jack wire, you should find 3 separate wires. Mine's got a red wire, a white wire, and then a bunch of bare wires. What I'm going to do is just twist my bare wires together so that I form essentially 3 separate wires. Now the colors of your wires may be completely different, but I'll show you what we need to do in order to get this headphone jack to work. The first thing I want to do is strip down a little bit of the casing on each of the wires. Just like that. And in order for this headphone jack to work properly, we need to combine 2 of these wires. Now, I can't just tell you which 2 wires to combine because all these are a little bit different, but I'll show you how to figure it out here now. So in order to figure out which wires you need to combine, you're going to need a multimeter and a switch button. I've got my multimeter set to ohms, and you can see every time I touch my probes together, I get a reading on the multimeter. That's basically telling me I've got an open circuit when it shows OL and a closed circuit when I get a reading on the multimeter. So what I'm going to do first is combine 2 of these wires by twisting the exposed portions together. So I've got my headphone jack plugged into my switch button, and I'm just going to touch my probes to my 2 wires. And you can see that the multimeter still says OL, meaning that there's an open circuit there. And then whenever I press my switch button, I get a reading on the multimeter. So that's exactly what we want. We've got a closed circuit when the button is being pressed and an open circuit when the button is released. If I were to touch my 2 probes to my wires and I get a reading right away in the multimeter, then I know I've got the wrong combination of wires and I need to try a different combination. That basically will just ensure that whatever button you plug into the toy will operate as it should. So now that I know which wires I need to combine, since I have got all these bare exposed wires here, what I need to do is put a heat shrink wire cover over those wires to basically add the cover back on it. That way it doesn't accidentally touch something else inside the toy and short something out. If you don't have heat shrink wire cover, you could use electrical tape, but you just want to make sure that that wire is covered and we just have the tip exposed. So I just slipped the wire cover over the wire, and then I'm going to use a heat gun to heat up that wire cover and it will shrink down. Now I can go ahead and fish my wires through the hole in the toy. So next thing I'm going to do is wrap a zip tie around my wires on the inside of the toy. And what that will do is basically act like a barrier so that if someone were to yank on the cord, it won't just pull the whole thing out of the toy. So I find the smaller the zip tie, the better. It just kind of grips the wire a little bit better. And then I'm going to snip off any extra zip tie. Next, what I like to do is use a little super glue or CA glue. And I like to just glue the zip tie kind of around the wire just so that I make sure that it's not going to slip. And you can use activator. This is just a can of Instant Bond activator, or you can just let it dry, but this will actually dry that glue instantly. Alright, so now we're ready to solder our headphone jack wires to our switch. Now, I didn't really do myself any favors by cutting my wires so short, so it's going to be a little bit tricky, but we can definitely still do it. What I like to do when I'm soldering my wires to an existing switch is I like to actually remove the wires that are already on this switch. The reason for that is when I go to solder my wires to it, what I oftentimes end up doing is reheating the solder on the wires that are already attached to the switch, and oftentimes they just come off anyways. So I'm just going to use my soldering iron, heat up these points to loosen up that solder, and then I'll combine these wires to my wires on my headphone jack before I solder them back to the switch. Now I'm going to strip back a little bit of the wire. And I can twist them together with my headphone jack wire. So I just twisted those wires together, and then I'm going to put some solder on them. Just like that. And then I just twisted the other one together, and I'm going to solder those together. Just like that. Now we can go ahead and resolder the switch back on. So before we take the time to put it all back together, it's a good idea to test it, just make sure that everything is going to work properly. So I've got a button, I'm going to plug it in. I'm going to turn the toy on. And I'm going to give it a press, make sure it works. There we go. So now we can go ahead and put it all back together. So I'm just realizing that this is going to be kind of hard for me to show you because of my wires being so short. So I'm going to kind of explain it to you, and I'll show you what I can. Since I pulled these wires out, I'm going to fish these wires back through this little clasp and then resecure the button on those two posts. Then I'm going to reinsert the trigger. The spring goes into this little housing there, and there's a little slot on the trigger that fits into the slot on the bottom of the trigger guard there. And this, I'm not sure what this is. I think it's just a decorative piece, but it goes here on the barrel. I'm going to put everything kind of back together. I'll try my best to show you how to do that, but it's going to be kind of tough. Now I can get all the screws put back in. All right, so now we've got everything put back together. It's time to test it. I've got my safety glasses on, and I'm going to point it in a safe direction, and I'm going to press my button and see if it works. There we go. It does shoot rather hard, so just be aware of that. So that's pretty much it. If you like this video, if you found it helpful, make sure you hit the like button and hit subscribe because we're posting new videos all the time. You can take these off now. If you want to find out more about Switch Adapted Toys, you can do so on our website at www.switchtoys.org. There we've got all different types of resources all about Switch adapting toys. We've got more how-to videos, we've got written manuals, we even have files for you to 3D print your own Switch button, and is very comparable to the name brand Switches that are out there. So you can find all of that on our website. Again, it's www.switchtoys.org, and I'll put a link in the description below. And if you've got a group, an organization, and you want to adapt toys for kids in your community, kind of on a bigger scale, you can check out what we call Switch Chapter. It's where we kind of help you through that process and help you serve your community in that way. And we've got a bunch of information on our website about that if you want to check that out as well. Lastly, if you are interested in a Switch adapted toy, but doing it yourself just isn't your thing, we do have an Etsy shop where we sell some pre-adapted toys that are ready to play with. And I'll put a link in the description below. All the toys that we have on there, we do have free manuals for you to do it yourself. But again, if this just isn't your thing, that's totally fine. Our whole goal is to get these toys into as many kids' hands as possible. So you can pick up a pre-adapted toy on our Etsy shop, and the proceeds just help support what we're doing here. So thank you in advance for checking that out. So I guess that's it. My name's Eric with Switch Adapted Toys, and we'll see you next time.
Switch Adapted Toys, making play possible.